Hello, and welcome to the Hamumu Halloween Home Horror Hoedown.
The podcast where we watch 31 horror movies throughout the hallowed month of October.
Ranging from the critically acclaimed to film school projects gone gruesomely awry.
And we take them all way too seriously.
I'm your host, Mike Hummel.
And I'm your host, Sully Hummel.
Now warning, we use a ghoulish number of spoilers, so watch the movies first.
Second warning, we don't know anything about anything, so don't take us seriously while we take these movies seriously.
Today's movie comes to us from 1986, and it is called April Fool's Day.
It is. It combines two of my least favorite things.
What are those?
The 80s and April Fool's Day.
The 80s is amazing musically and in no other way. None of that music was in this movie, so whatever.
No, it was not. No, there's very little about the 80s that I think of as, oh, that was amazing. It's sad we don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
You look back and hairstyles and fashion and political movements and basically everything. I'm just like, oh, that was terrible.
Very special time in our history. A time when there were people named Chaz, Muffy, Arch, Kit. Those are names.
I mean, to be fair, those are rich person names from the 80s, but yes, they are definitely names. This is another one of those rich people are different movies.
Yeah, that seems to be our theme this year for some reason. And in this one, just a quick synopsis is that Muffy, and that's her real name, and in the movie, the people actually comment on, so that's really her name?
Right, it's not short for anything.
No, her name is Muffy.
Yeah.
And, not just Muffy. Muffy St. John comes and invites a whole crowd of her college buddies to visit at her parents' cabin on an island that is disconnected from everything. It's very private.
Right. I don't remember it being very clear about exactly where they were, but it seemed very northeastern to me.
Sure, there were trees.
There were trees, but there was the ferry and the gruff. He sort of seemed like a many generations Maine guy. Somebody living in Maine or Maryland or I don't know.
Well, these are fine northeasterly rich people who were getting together for a party. Was it an April Fool's Day party? Was it Muffy's birthday? I don't understand.
I think it was just a gathering. They were just getting together for a party. The
just
sort of thing where, her parents are gone. She has this island to herself and she invited friends over. But it happened to be taking place over April Fool's Day. So they were all pranking each other from the very beginning.
Well, a lot. Yeah.
With really, really high class quality pranks. Your fly's open when it's not.
Yes, that was popular.
So that was kind of how it started. But then while they were on the ferry...
The first official big prank was a guy getting stabbed in the gut and falling off the boat, which, it was fake. Everybody, you all dove in to rescue him for no reason.
Right? They set up, and it was pretty elaborate. They set up the whole thing where they were having some knife throwing contest, and one of them was losing and was getting annoyed, and it was pretty elaborate, but it turned out to be a prank. But in the course of that prank, the assistant on the ferry was one of the people who jumped in the water, and he just decided to stay in the water while they were docking, and he got crushed by the ferry.
Which is so much about that made perfect sense. How he couldn't get away, couldn't swim underwater, couldn't swim between the beams of the pier, and apparently getting hit by a boat just knocks an eye right out of your head. That's what boats do.
Well, I think it got crushed or something.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but anyway, that starts off the weekend on the island. The sheriff just happens to be there, grabs the guy, takes the boat away, which leaves them with no way of getting off the island.
Very clever. Mm-hmm. And of course, murdering ensues. murder
Right.
after murder, just as you would expect.
Sort of like you pointed out, sort of like Frogs, where it was just,
Yeah.
people would wander off alone and not come back.
Yeah, and sort of like Frogs, there was a snake going after somebody in the woods, and just like Frogs, they were on a deserted island full of rich people, and
just like
Very
Frogs, the rich person who had invited them there spent most of the movie being more concerned about why they were there
then
than
all the murders.
people dying. Which, big ol' spoiler alert, is explained
Okay.
in this movie in a way that was not explained in Frogs.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't know if it's time to talk about the twist.
I feel like if we don't just put it out there, we're going to be dancing around it through this whole
because
review.
we're going to have a lot of things related to that.
So, as much as there were April Fool's pranks happening throughout the whole movie, like exploding cigars and whoopee cushions and like little things like that, and then the murders start, and then, surprise,
April Fools!
the whole thing was an April Fool's prank that they were all in on. As they got murdered, they got pulled in on the prank, and none of them were actually dead at all.
Yes, so, haha. It's an interesting idea, because it's a movie you watch, and throughout the whole movie, you're following these murders, and you're wondering the mystery of who's doing it, and the twist at the end is nobody's doing it, it's all a joke.
Right.
Which is a little like the It Was All a Dream, but it's not quite the same, because these are events that actually happened. You're just confused about what really happened.
Right. Well, and I'm torn because I would be annoyed by that. Like at the end, then I'm left thinking, well, was this even a horror movie? Like, nobody really died, whatever. It was all pretend. But, it was. We thought it was real when it was happening. The thing that saved it for me, I think, was that there was a reason why. It wasn't just an elaborate April Fool's prank.
Yeah.
She was testing out this idea for having a whodunit scenario. Like she was going to turn this cabin into like a bed and breakfast with a murder mystery element. And so they were trying it out.
Her reasoning for that was insane, because basically she's like, now I know that was extreme and crazy and you all thought you were going to die, and we were all in grave danger because any one of you could have tried to, stab me or whatever in the process, and people could have died. But when I do it for real, the people showing up will know that it's fake and they'll be in on it. And well, then why didn't you practice doing that?
Right. That ultimately means that this was a terrible dress rehearsal for what she's trying to do. So it was definitely that they shoehorned this into the plot to make it make sense.
Yeah.
But not, I don't know why. Like, why did they go to the extreme of having literally nobody die? Because even the guy who fell off the boat at the beginning,
that was part of it.
It was all part of it. And that seems like it takes the teeth out of the horror movie. Like, there's no, why?
Well, I mean, it's like I was saying before, I think that's an interesting idea, because while you're watching it, the teeth are there. You're watching something threatening and mysterious and you're trying to solve it. And then at the end, okay, so the answer at the end turns it around, so it wasn't anything bad. But you didn't know that when you were actually experiencing it.
The answer at the end makes it so that you thought there were teeth in the movie, and it turns out they were just those little plastic glow-in-the-dark teeth that you get when you go trick-or-treating.
But to be fair, that's true of every movie. In the end, it was just a movie. So
okay, but not in that universe. Like, it was a movie for us, but in that movie universe, people really died. Like, horrible things really happened. And in this, it was a movie for us, but it was like nothing happened in the other universe.
I think that's a sort of, it's almost like you could split the movie at that point and just say the movie before that, horror movie, the movie after, interesting mind manipulation movie.
Except there was none of the mind manipulation element. And I think maybe that's what's bothering me about it, is that I like the mind manipulation and I'm very unsatisfied with that piece of it. Like it was very wrap it up at the end.
Yes, what actually got me, I have to admit, I chose this movie because I had heard the twist. It makes me sad because I had heard going in, I added this to the list a long time ago, and what I heard back then was, oh, you should see April Fool's Day, it's a twist on the slasher genre. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. And then before I could get away from it, I found out what the twist was.
Oh, yeah.
So I knew the twist going in. I found that out like a year ago. So watching the movie, I was like, wait, is this really what I thought it was? Because it's very convincing. It's too convincing. Like, there's no way this could have happened. Like, it could have been that convincing.
So here's the thing, though. The assistant fairy person falling off was so unconvincing that I was like, either this is an extremely terribly done movie, or that is also a prank. Like, I didn't necessarily assume that everything was. Right. I didn't assume everything was a prank, but I was like, well, this is going to turn out to be a prank. And then it didn't right at first. So then, you know, the longer it goes without explaining that that was a prank, I was like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But then it kind of throws the whole movie into question.
But that's how I kind of felt. Like, I was like, are these real murders? Like, not that they were so believable in real life, but that they were so believable within the level of realism that we were seeing in this movie. I'm like, I don't really know that these people are surviving, because how would that work? And in the end, they technically explained it, but it doesn't really work.
No.
It's too good.
And it fails that twist test that I have. Like, if a movie has a twist, you have to be able to go back and look at everything prior to the twist.
Speaking of.
And it still has to work. And at this point, after the twist, you go back and I'm like, I have too many questions. There's too many things where I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that person would not have been willing to participate. I'm pretty sure that couldn't have happened in that way, you know.
And there were a lot of ones where, like, somebody died within a couple rooms of somebody else. First of all, silently, which doesn't even work for a real death. Like, they were murdered. What happened? Second of all, they were laying there dead. The person found the dead body, so they had to convincingly be a dead body to this other person. Then they had to sometime in this gap of a couple minutes get explained that they were supposed to pretend to be dead.
Right.
And not be like, oh my gosh, what? All these previous ones were fake?
Loudly, so that the people in the hall are like, wait, what's going on in there? Or like when Nikki went down the well and there's like heads bobbing up and bodies bobbing up. And then later they're like, oh, it was all movie magic and it was, you know, makeup and these, you know, fake heads and whatever. And I'm like, no.
That's not convincing.
She was really up close and personal. The heads, maybe, because I could see her, like, trying not to touch them, but there was a whole body.
Well, what's interesting about that is, if you think about it, I'm assuming that was the real girl, not like a doll, because a doll, you couldn't do a whole person. That would never work. If it was her, she was underwater. What happened?
Right.
How did she live under there?
Neither one of those scenarios makes sense.
So that's the problem that I see. And I think it could be really interesting to do this movie very carefully and professionally in a way that looked super convincing to the audience, but could be explained clearly. Like, in the end, you'd be like, oh my gosh, those people, you know, were dragged away and given a thorough talking to for half an hour and explained what they needed to do.
I would almost want it to be done like Clue style, where at the end they go back and like show you scenes that you didn't see, where they're like, this is how we managed this, and oh, you almost caught us here, but we slipped in, you know. That would be
really fun.
I think that would be interesting.
So, I mean, that would be cool. And I think, I mean, that's why I found this movie interesting, was it's a new, fun idea. Was it good, though?
I think, you know, going back to, you said it's a twist on a slasher film. I'm like, well, there was very little slasher in it, even though literally everybody except two of the characters was supposed to die, three of them, because Buffy/Muffy was still running around. The
explanation that they found was that Muffy, which is a totally real name, had a twin sister named Buffy, which is also a totally real name, and great, because what a great combo that is.
Right. Obviously, if you had a set of twin girls, you would name them Buffy and Muffy. So everybody but three people was supposed to die. And they did, but none of it was slasher to me. Like, it didn't feel like a slasher film. Like, you would see like a little bit of something happening and then it would cut away.
Well, because they had to.
And then you'd come back and they would be dead. Oh, yeah, that makes sense, because they didn't actually die.
But that was also pretty convincing to me. Like, it kind of felt like, I don't know, it felt like they were just not showing it to you. Like, it didn't leave me going, oh, well, something's up because they didn't show it. It felt kind of like that cutaway just before it's too late.
Yeah, but it felt like that. It felt like if you're trying to make a slasher film be like PG-13 or, you know, it's taking the teeth out of the horror film piece of it. It sanded off all the sharp edges, which then made it not really that horror-like. And honestly, I was more interested in the whole Buffy Muffy twin sister escape from an insane asylum and was trying to kill them for revenge. I was way more interested in that plot line. I wanted that movie.
Yeah, I think you could probably find that movie.
Well, that's true. But I felt like they untwisted the movie. Like, it was interesting, we were finding the twist, and then they were like, oh no, it's something much less interesting than that.
I suppose.
I guess is kind of real life. So I have an idea for how this movie could have ended that would have made me feel less annoyed at how defanged the whole movie became.
They'd all
with the
just
twist.
murdered each other in response.
Well, sort of. I mean, not that, but if somebody had really died as the result of this prank, so this prank is going on and everything's fine, and toward the end, right before they reveal, one of these people who's now been hunted for an entire day, they think, and lost all of their friends, you get to this level of desperation, and something happens, one of them, the two remaining people turn on each other and one of them kills the other one, or one of them kills the person who set the whole thing up.
And then, finds the fakery, and they're like, oh no.
So somebody for real dies, and then the people who were all in on the prank were like, oh, no, wait, stop. This was all a joke.
Yeah, that sounds a lot more interesting.
So that there's some real level of intensity, because otherwise it's just that letdown.
And at the end of this movie, they sort of set up a bit of that with the surprise gift left for Muffy in her room, which was a dark reminder of her past. And then, someone's slitting her throat, but it was a fake throat slit. And then they're friends again.
Right. And it was, for a minute I thought it might be real and it might do what I was looking for, because that character had been one who, the prank that they had played on her in her room it triggered an actual emotional response.
Yeah.
It was really something from her past that was painful and that she was struggling with. And so there was that possibility that they might have pushed a little too far and, pushed her into, she was going to kill Muffy to get revenge.
Yeah.
Which would have been extreme.
In the scene at the end when they were all revealed, just hanging out, which was super weird. They didn't react at all when the surviving girl entered the room. Very strange. But in that scene, Nan, who was the nerd girl who was traumatized by this event, she looked angry. And I was like, oh, this is going to be the thing. And no, she just fake killed her.
She fake killed her. And then it was like, oh, just kidding. Also, why did Muffy scream and react like she was being killed when she had a fake knife pulled across her throat?
You feel something sliding across.
She couldn't tell the difference.
Wet coming down.
She couldn't tell that she wasn't being cut open. Come on.
I don't know.
Anyway, that's my idea for improving this storyline.
We'll try that in our remake.
Ha! All right. Sounds good.
One thing I really did enjoy was one of the pranks, I guess it's a prank, was there was a painting with the eyes cut out of it. And you could see these eyes flicking back and forth through the eye holes. And they're like, what's going on? And they moved the painting and it was one of those kitty cat clocks with the eyes going back and forth. That was pretty awesome. Actually, so was I think it was the very next prank, was people were going to bed, they turned off their light, and turning it off made this other light go on.
That was, and three-way, there were two lamps, and then the overhead light, and each time you turned off one of the lights, it would switch to a different one, and that was a pretty clever trick.
Yeah. I don't know if that's possible, but it's pretty cool.
I mean, it involves some pretty significant electrical work, I think, to get the overhead light involved.
They got some help from their Hollywood makeup artist.
Right. What did you think of the cast of characters that we were dealing with?
I think we got our cast of the usual obnoxious, horny teens who are pulling pranks on each other. They would be in any movie, not just an April Fool's movie. That's part of what makes them so obnoxious. And we got one that looks like Kevin Bacon. We got one that looks like Greg Kinnear. We got one that looks like Helen Hunt.
We've got the one that looks like Sarah Michelle Gellar, whose character, not only did she look and talk very similarly to Sarah Michelle Gellar, but then her character, I kept calling her the Vampire Slayer character because she was the one girl who, like, she climbed down the well because nobody else would do it, and she went out to find the well when the water stopped working, and like she was always the one who's like, fine, I'll do it.
Yeah, and that's a great thing about this movie was the water stopped coming out of the sink and they went to the well, which is the thing that gives water to the sink, so that made sense. Oh wait, that's not why
it
they
wasn't
did it,
the
though.
septic. They didn't go looking. But what didn't make sense is that the water stopped coming out of the sink. So then they went to get water out of a well that even before they found the bodies in it
right.
was green and disgusting and like uncovered.
Okay.
Like this was not a well you would drink out of.
Oh no. And then she jumped into it, so.
Right. Although I did like that after that whole scene where, she's in the water and she finds the bodies and there's all this trauma that... And we get back to the house and, they're like patting her on the shoulder and they're there-ing her. And somebody brings her a glass of water and she freaks out. I'm like, oh, that was appropriate. That was good. Yeah, we did have the kind of normal, we had the like obnoxiously rich kid. We had the farm kid. We had the theater person.
There was some subplot about the one kid, Harvey.
Yes, Harvey was one of the poor kids. There were two of them. One was obviously like went to a public college,
oh my gosh.
Whatever, and they were just like letting him hang out with them.
Yeah.
But then Harvey he looked like, I actually called him the extra Richie Rich character at the beginning because I was like, oh, he's like the wealthiest of the wealthy. But it turns out he was actually a farm kid. Like he grew up on a farm and was just trying to break into the nouveau riche.
Well, he was trying to get a job with Muffy's dad or something.
But because he wanted to be rich. Like his whole goal was, I'm going to break in and be one of these people. Whereas the other guy was like, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't,
I'm Kevin Bacon. It's cool.
Yeah, I don't need to be you. And so, he wanted to get a job with Muffy's dad and he wanted to hang out and date Muffy because like there was a whole scene where he was rehearsing what he was going to say as to why they should be a couple and he kept getting to like, well, with my skills and he never was able to finish it.
No idea what she brings to the table.
Like, he couldn't even pretend that there was something important that she brought because he was so wrapped up in it really was her money that he cared about. He didn't know anything else about her.
Which, I mean, that goes a little significantly deeper than the entire rest of the movie. Like, that's a plot. There's something going on there. Speaking of deep, important messaging, there was one line in the movie where I was like, oh, there's a little something going on here. This kid, Rob, is talking about how he was told by, job counselor type guy that he was not serious enough. And the other guy, Archie, I believe, says, well, in today's world, how can you be serious when at any moment someone could steal a nuke and kill us all?
Yes, it was that was very 1980s.
It was the Cold War coming up.
But it was interesting to hear that because it made me realize, they had the same mentality as millennials do now.
Yeah.
Like, that same mentality just keeps building on itself. Like, we just keep digging ourselves deeper and deeper into our youth feeling like they don't have a future. Sure. Which seems particularly relevant since while we were watching this movie, or somewhere around the time that we were watching this movie, Greta from Sweden was speaking to the UN about how children in her generation don't have a future.
Yeah, she was talking about how she's concerned about people stealing nukes. No, that wasn't her topic.
That was not her topic.
It's not the 80s anymore. Right now, the world is literally on fire instead of metaphorically.
Yes. One thing I struggled with because it was from the 80s was that all of these characters looked very similar to me.
Yeah, they did.
Which is always a problem in these movies. Like, when you have a big cast of teenagers, there's always that, like, wait, they all look the same. It's hard to tell them apart. Which one is which? But they were all so stereotypically 1980s rich, obnoxious people that I was most of the way through the film before I really knew who was who. And I struggled even guessing, like, usually I solve that by, I don't worry about learning their actual names. I just give them nicknames and I'm like, oh, that's the preppy and that's the, tough girl and that's the nerd. And like, I just pick up on their stereotype and then remember which one is which then. But here I couldn't even necessarily figure out how they were supposed to be differentiated. within the context of their characters, because I'm enough removed from that. Like, I was young enough, I think, in the 80s that I didn't recognize the tags like we were talking about when we talked about It. I'm like, I can see that this character's supposed to be different because she's a little quieter or she's a little something, but I'm not exactly sure which member of the clique she's supposed to be.
Yeah, they were definitely hard to tell apart. They were generic teens, for sure.
Very generic.
I mean, not really teens, because they were supposed to be college kids, which is good, because they were the same age of actors that always play teens. But in this case, they were playing their own age of like 21, 22.
Even as playing college kids, though, I still was like, oh, no, these people are well out of college. And like, they looked like they were in their late 20s.
Yeah, probably. Some of them.
Yeah. Ratings. I'm afraid I am not going to be rating this movie highly.
I got that impression when you were reading Facebook while we were watching the movie.
Yeah, it wasn't that interesting. I really wasn't intrigued. I very much intensely disliked all of the characters.
Sure.
Like, there really wasn't anybody. Usually I can find somebody where I'm like, oh, I'm on that guy's side, or I'm backing that character. I hope that's the last one alive. And I guess the two that were alive at the end, Rob and Kit, were the ones I would have hoped would be alive had I been able to identify them early enough. Like, they were definitely the more like common sense, rational people. They're the ones that are always saving the day at the end, right?
Sure.
But I couldn't really see that in them early enough to care. The twist or the untwist kind of annoys me. I wasn't that impressed with anything about the filmmaking. Like,
no.
I mean, it wasn't terrible. Like, it wasn't bad in terms of filmography or set or the script. It just, it wasn't good either. So I'm going to give this movie 2 exploding cigars out of 5.
Okay, yeah. I like what you're saying about kind of the mediocreness, I feel like the acting and directing and the cinematography and stuff was like surprisingly not bad. Like, it was all fine. Like, I didn't feel like the actors were terrible like I usually do in these kind of movies.
Sure, for this kind of movie, it was, yeah.
Yeah, but again, nothing great, just surprisingly okay, which is quite a compliment. I think I liked it more than you. I liked the twist, sort of. Like I said, it doesn't make any sense with what we actually see, so it doesn't really pan out, but I like what they were trying to do. And I think it is an interesting exercise to say, you've seen this, it was horrifying and scary. I mean, it wasn't really, but as much as movies like this are, you had the mystery and the scares. Now, haha, that wasn't real. I feel like that does sort of work in a way that It Was All a Dream doesn't work. There's something there that if it was done really well would be cool. They didn't do it really well, so whatever. And I have to say, it definitely didn't give me that ooh that I get when a twist really comes out, when you're like, oh, that all makes sense.
Right.
It didn't do that. So it's not great. I definitely wouldn't recommend it to be seen. It's just kind of meh. It's fun that it exists, is kind of my take on the whole idea. I wish this had been tried 1 or 2 more times. There is a remake. I don't know if it's technically a remake. It is another movie called April Fool's Day. It's by the same director, I think, or maybe it's just one of the producers. And it shares some music, so it clearly is related. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's actually taking the same ideas. I don't know if it's really worth us checking it out or not.
That frustrates me because I would like to see if they kept the twist, like if the plot is all the same in terms of, like, I know it's been modernized.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the same plot from the trailer, but I don't know if it has the same twist.
Right. So I'm kind of curious to see it, just to see how it compares. But also I disliked this one so much that I'm like, well, then I'm just setting myself up to dislike another movie.
Yeah, I doubt it's a great movie. Yeah. It also looked like it was made for TV, which is not a good sign.
Yeah.
So, that said, let's talk about this movie, and I think I'm going to give it 2 exploding cigars out of 5. And it was a little bit fun, but, not good. So, There you
I
go.
mean, a very, very little bit fun.
It's almost, I would put it on par with Frogs for supremely different reasons. Like, I had my fun with Frogs, but also that was boring and terribly acted. And I had my fun with this, but also it wasn't really a good story. Like, very different feelings. This movie didn't get boring like Frogs did at all.
Oh,
It
I
was
disagree
fine.
with you on that.
Well, yeah, you were on Facebook.
See, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh, I would rather watch Frogs because it was bad enough that I was entertained by how bad it was.
Yeah, that's where I got the fun out of that one. And with this one, I got the fun from the actual movie legitimately. Just, I didn't get that much fun, hence 2 out of 5.
Right.
So, that's my opinion on this one.
That's it for April's Fool's Day, and we will be back tomorrow with another movie review.
Hooray for us!
Hooray for us!
Ooh.
Oh.
Meh.
Well.